Hi, greetings from the Camino de Santiago. How do I turn this thing around? Okay, don't worry about it. Hi, I'm here on the Camino, just about 4 kilometers from my house, and I'm busy on my way back now. I was chuckling to myself because I remembered a book that I read some years ago, and how it influenced us. Anyway, this book was called The Small Woman, and it's about this woman who became a Christian in London, and she was a charwoman. I don't know if you know what a charwoman is. Anyway, a charwoman is a cleaning lady. She used to come and clean people's houses, you know. So she became a Christian, and she started going to church, and it was just the most wonderful experience for her. And as she grew in the things of the Lord, you know, she began to have this tremendous desire to go and be a missionary. And because she, you know, it was a time of great missionary endeavor. So there were people going into South Africa, India, all over the place. Hudson Taylor going to China, you know. Anyway, this was quite a bit after the initial great missionary movement, you know. So this, I'm talking about now 1920s, 1930s, around there, before the Second World War. And this woman, her name was Gladys Aylward. Gladys, she was about, I think she was about 32 or 33, very devoted, you know, and she began going to all the missionary organizations in London and offering herself up to be a missionary, you know. And she had it fixed, you know, that she wanted to go to China because she had heard about these people, you know, and she had had some correspondence with a woman in China, and she was quite serious about, you know, going to China and spending the rest of her life just serving the Lord, you know, and winning the Chinese people to Christ. So anyway, she went to all the missionary organizations and she made applications, and one after another, they rejected her. You know, firstly, I mean, she was 32 years old, and they considered that like too old to learn a language. That's what they said. And then they felt that she did not have the necessary academic credentials to be a missionary. And, well, you know, she didn't come from a very good, you know, class, you know, British, very class conscious. So she was a cleaning lady. You know, they were looking for graduates from Oxford University and that type of thing. Anyway, yeah, very, very typical. You know, I mean, if you just considered, you know, the fact that Jesus chose his disciples, you know, from, I mean, artisans, you know, fishermen, and he was a carpenter himself, you know. But, you know, I mean, I think if anybody had wanted to start a reputable ministry in those days, they would have gone to Jerusalem and sought out all the young men from the good families, you know, who were going to the seminary, you know, and training with, you know, Gamaliel. And, well, you know, Paul trained with Gamaliel, so, you know, we're not excluding Paul, but actually Jesus really focused, you know, on the everyday people, and he made disciples. Anyway, you know, these missionary organizations, they didn't see fit to send her. So she didn't have any support. She couldn't go to the churches and say, listen, they're sending me, you know, are you going to support me? So what she did was went to a travel agency down the road, and she was working as a cleaning lady, and she went to them and she said, listen, I want a train ticket to China. Of course, and there was the Oriental Express. There were trains. I mean, you could travel from London all the way to China by train. It would take you a long time, but yeah, it did exist. So she went to the travel agency down the road, you know, where you get your tickets to Mallorca or whatever. Just joking. And she said, listen, I want to book a ticket, but I don't have the money. So can I come every week and just give a little bit? So every week when she got her weekly pay as a cleaning lady, she would go down and she would give them a bit of money. And then eventually she went down to the train station. She had a little suitcase, those old little suitcases that people had. And it was very useful because she found herself later on using it as a pillow, sleeping, on a train siding in Outer Mongolia. So anyway, it's a very interesting book. You should read it. And so she went down to the train station, and her mother and father were with her, of course. They would be. I have experience of that. And they tearfully said goodbye to her, and on she got to the train, and she traveled for like weeks and weeks, and eventually she came to the Chinese border. What she didn't know was, in the meantime, Russia had started a war against China, so she ended up, coming right up to the conflict area, and then the train stopped, and she had to get off, and she just walked along the railway tracks. She said, well, Lord, you're going to take me to China, so somehow I'm going to get there. And fortunately, eventually she did get where she was going. And she had made contact with a woman, as I said before. And this woman lived up in the mountains. I don't know where. I don't know China. But it was way up in the mountains of China somewhere. And there were no Christians. She hadn't been able to make any converts. But she did actually own a house, and this house was on a major traveling route. And so this older lady died. So Gladys Aylward arrived there, and I can't remember whether she met with this woman or what happened, but she was given this house, on this traveling route. And this is the reason why I was thinking. They made a movie about it some years ago. It was called The Small Woman, and some very famous film star, I can't remember who she was, she took the part. And so Gladys had this house, and she just thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing here, but I've got this house. And she noticed that all these people were coming past, muleteers. They would be carting provisions, and merchandise from one city to the next. And so she put up a sign, and she called it, I don't know, gave it some name, this inn, and if I'm not mistaken, she became known for giving a meal and a bed, nice clean circumstances, and a story. So she had to figure out how to get these muleteers right into her place, because most of them would just go past. They'd see this foreign woman, and they weren't very well appreciated. The British in those days in China, the Chinese people saw them as like devils. That's really how they saw them. So then she realized what she should do is she should go out and grab the leading mule. So you have a train of mules, and the lead mule will right in the front. There'd be like maybe 6 or 7 or 10 mules, and then they would be pulling, and they would be carrying all this merchandise. So if she could just get the lead mule, into her albergue, her hostel, then all the rest of the mules would follow, and of course the muleteers would have to come in as well. These Chinese men, and in the beginning they would get quite annoyed because they didn't really want to stay at her place. But once those mules were inside her place, it was impossible to get them out. So God gave her this wisdom, and then she would serve a meal, and they would be satisfied, and give them a good place to sleep, and of course a story, and Gladys Elwood had lots of stories, like Noah and the Ark. And she could tell the story about Joseph and his brothers, and how he went to Egypt and eventually how the people of Israel were made captive and slaves, for 400 years. And then of course she would tell them about how God had saved them, led them out of the land. And of course one thing led to another before you knew it. She was able to share the gospel far and wide, and these muleteers, and she'd give them literature and they'd carry on. Anyway, that's the reason why I'm saying this is because it reminded me, 15 years ago when we started this albergue, we were looking for a place, and I went to the local supermarket, and they had like a box. In those days they had a box, this is not that long for, they had a whole, big box of like videos, CDs, DVDs with movies on. And I was just kind of looking through this, not really very serious about it. And I saw this movie, The Small Woman. And it was about, all about the story. It's okay. It's not wonderfully kind of, it's not done with the kind of intention that Gladys would have wanted it to be. It was more kind of a popularized version. But nevertheless, right, so I took the movie, and I had been actually thinking about that. And I was thinking about how we could have an albergue, and when the pilgrims come past, we could bring them in, And so when I listened to it and watched that movie, I just thought, no, this is no coincidence. God has given me this this movie to watch, and this is something that we want to do. And anyway, to make a long story short, we eventually found a house, and we reformed it. Took years of hard work, and now we have a place where we offer beds. And 2 days ago, I had a young German guy, okay, not so young, probably about 35, and he came, and we were just sitting talking, having coffee, and then some Spanish guys, and I was busy sharing with him, talking to him, and telling him about this young German guy that came the day before, whose name was Max. And we had a long time, of talking about the things of the Lord, And so he was listening very intently. And then he just said, this was 10 o'clock in the morning. And then he just said, listen, can I stay here tonight? So anyway, so he stayed, right? And we spent hours, we had dinner together and we spent hours. And I was explaining to him the Old Testament. And I was telling him about how, because he had become a Christian and he had read the New Testament, and he said he couldn't understand the Old Testament, so he wasn't, even trying to read it because it was confusing him. So I began to explain to him how he could find Christ in the Old Testament, and speaking to him about Cain and Abel and Isaac and Ishmael and Esau and Jacob. And, as I was sharing, I could see the penny dropped, and he was beginning to realize, that Christ is in the Old Testament. So yeah, and over the years, we've had literally thousands of people coming in. And often when I see them coming, I'll end with this. I see them coming, right? And a group will come. And I've noticed, that if the front guy just walks past, everybody will follow, because that's how people are. And so what I've learned to do, if I see a group coming, I'll go out and I'll engage maybe a little bit of a conversation with one or two of the people right in the front, hi, where you from, where are you going tonight? And then they'll look at, and they'll say, is there, can we drink coffee? And I say, yeah, sure, come inside, And so as soon as they come inside, everybody else comes in. And it always reminds me of Gladys Elwood. And so she spent many, many years in China. And the movie was famous because what happened was, eventually she was taken into the service of the local Mandarin. This was a Confucian scholar, absolutely brilliant man, And she would, he recognized a diligent person, and he asked her if she would go into all the mountains and speak to the women that were binding cloths around the children's feet, and they understood that this was a terrible thing to do, and she was put in charge of that. So as she was going around, and really she had this incredible influence in China, sowing seeds, because the church in China now is growing faster than anywhere else in the world, and it's probably 200 million or coming to 300 million people, which is a remarkable thing. But these original missionaries like her, she didn't see, this incredible harvest, but she sowed thousands of seeds into the hearts of the people, by telling them these stories. So, yeah, it encourages me, because I believe that God is going to do an amazing thing in Europe. I can see the tide turning. I can see that people are realizing that there's something missing here. And I just thank God for this opportunity to be here in a very godless culture and share with them the things of the Lord. So, don't know if you can see me there, but God bless you. Greetings from Spain.